All right, so let's start this broadcast with the big story that we are tracking on WION at this hour. Now, in diplomacy, not everything is black and white. Now, two nations that are visibly at loggerheads with each other could still be holding active backdoor negotiations. On most occasions, the common public is, of course, kept in the dark about these negotiations that are held, but the developments over the last 24 hours are very interesting. What they've done is that they've proven that the United States and China are indeed talking. Now, on the world stage, the two nations, in fact, resort to sharp accusations against each other. But when their interests align, Washington and Beijing sure do see eye to eye. Before we get to the politics and the diplomacy part, let's in fact tell you about Travis King. He's a 23-year-old American soldier. He was deployed in South Korea for army duty as part of a rotation. But at that time, he was accused of assaulting two people. For reasons that are not very clear, believe it or not, he crossed over into North Korea in the month of July, where he was detained immediately by Pyongyang. The North Korean media claimed that Travis King had complained of inhuman treatment and racism within the American military. That's a serious charge there. But cut to 2 months later, Travis King was seen disembarking from a plane in Texas in the United States. The plane landed at a military base in San Antonio. King was accompanied by a few other officials. So what transpired behind closed doors? Now, it might be surprising to some viewers. Sweden has its embassy in Pyongyang. In the past as well, the embassy has in fact negotiated on Washington's behalf. The Sweden acted as the mediator between the United States and North Korea and made the deal possible. Now, interestingly, China has also played a pretty big role in this transfer. Now, Travis King was first transferred from Pyongyang to a Chinese city bordering North Korea. This is where he was received by the U.S. ambassador to China. The two then headed to another Chinese city 3 hours away. The flight took off towards South Korea and then landed at the Osan Air Base. And finally, a U.S.-bound plane reached Texas. The diplomatic details about the plan are pretty scarce. So one big question that arises here is, what's in this for China? Now, this is a rare example of cooperation between the United States and North Korea and China. Now, for Washington, well, it's its own soldier that's involved. For Pyongyang, the country's territorial rights are involved. But what is Beijing gaining out of facilitating this transfer? Now, we're yet to know the answer to this question, but this, of course, tells us more about Xi Jinping's diplomacy. Knowing China's legacy, the leader follows the steps of his predecessor. So who is Xi Jinping mirroring here? Is it the founder of the People's Republic of China, Mao Zedong, or the former chairperson of the Central Military Commission of the PRC, Deng Xiaoping? Now, these two leaders had shared their two versions of diplomacy. In many ways, Mao set the foundations of China's foreign policy, and Mao's ideology was only China-centric. In his times, he had made China self-sufficient in nearly all of the resources and technologies, and this, of course, was his way of seeing diplomacy. Extend the hand to the world when it benefits you. But Deng comes from another school of thought altogether. He's often called the pragmatist when compared to Mao. He adopted an economic development strategy called reform and opening, where reform meant changes in the domestic economic systems and opening meant joining the global economy and allowing foreign trade and investment to flourish. Under him, China became one of the world's major trading nations and joined the World Trade Organization. Xi Jinping's 10 years in power, he's in fact swung between these two ideologies time and again. In fact, slamming the United States on the international front and making backdoor diplomacy could of course be seen as a mixture of both Mao and Deng, and this of course is an interesting mix of policy that is followed. All right, now to give us more perspective on this, we're being joined by Mr. Edward P. Joseph, who's a political analyst and also a senior fellow at the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Now, Mr. Joseph, this is a crucial bit of diplomacy that seems to be accomplished very successfully. The American soldier who crossed over into North Korea has now come back, has been brought back to the United States of America. It gives a sense of how difficult it is for the United States to, in fact, carry out a negotiation to secure the release of one of its soldiers with North Korea, which does not have a formal channel of negotiation with the United States.
Of course, it's extraordinarily difficult. There's no ability for the United States to speak directly to the North Koreans, and that's why the U.S. has to rely on reliable partners, and now we can say allies, because Sweden is about to join NATO. So Sweden and the United States are not only longtime friends, but they're allies. And Sweden has diplomatic representation, has its embassy in Pyongyang, and it is the one that mediated here. And of course, the two things that I would point out here. Number one is the timing of this. This comes as, of course, a great relief to the United States, to the Biden administration, which just concluded what was a very controversial deal to get Iranian Americans back out that were being held unjustly in Iran. And that deal, which resulted in the release, ironically enough, of funds held by South Korea,
right,
not North Korea, but South Korea, to the tune of some
$6 billion.
Exactly, $6 billion. That created a lot of controversy in the United States. And here we have a highly significant case of a U.S. soldier being held in North Korea. He fled. He effectively crossed the border himself into North Korea. And we see that apparently there was nothing that North Korea gained here in terms of some type of compensation. So that is quite significant, and we can speak about the role as well that China played. Please.
Absolutely, indeed. And this, of course, was what I wanted to ask you here. Now, what is quite clear is that the soldier was taken from North Korea into China and then flown from there to the United States. How is it that the United States and China also seem to have cooperated on this?
Okay, I think we need to put this into perspective. And let's look first to the comments of U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Mohammed. Let's look at that and parse those very carefully. He did thank China, but he thanked China for its role in facilitating. The role in mediating and the greater gratitude was expressed to Sweden. And we see that on background, U.S. officials have said and made it very clear that China did not play a mediating role. In other words, China did not play some role in convincing the North Koreans to release Travis King, Private Travis King. It was Sweden who played that role, and only Sweden who played that role. So we need to put this in perspective. And then we say, okay, well, why would China help facilitate? That is, receive Private King and then help allow that. And of course, the U.S. ambassador came and met Private King and got him onto an airplane from China. Well, put it this way. What choice would Xi Jinping really have had if Sweden had negotiated, as it had, agreement from the North Koreans, and then China had said, well, no, we're not going to allow Private King? Sweden would know that. That means the entire European Union would know that, and that would be very bad and embarrassing for Xi Jinping at a time when he's trying to split the European Union from the United States. So we should put this into context. This wasn't some fantastic, amazing breakthrough. China did play a facilitating role. The U.S. thanked it for that, but that's as far as it goes. Please.
All right. Very interesting. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Joseph, for joining us and getting us those insights there.
You're welcome.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.